Hi, I'm Bob Carroll. I'm the Executive Vice President at Permanent Solutions Labor Consultants, and I'm your host for today's episode of Employee Relations Words of Wisdom. And I'm joined today by Daniel Berkley, a partner with Fox Rothschild. Daniel's out in California right now. Dan, it's good to have you here.
Well, thanks, Bob. It's a pleasure to be with you and here in California. Pretty nice these days.
Michigan's a little colder than where you're at, I'll tell you that right now, but you're from here originally, so you know what I'm talking about.
I'm a Detroiter through and through with a good residence in California, so I've got the best of both worlds.
Very good. So for people that haven't seen you on the show, why don't you just give us a little bit of your background real quick?
Sure. I attended law school at what is now known as Berkeley Law here in Berkeley, California, and was shocked and amazed at the politics of the school when I was here. And then from there, I went directly to the NLRB in San Francisco, Region 20. Spent 5 years there prosecuting the unions and the companies alike to learn my craft. And immediately leaving there, I joined a large law firm out of Philadelphia, had my own firm for a while, and I'm back into a Philadelphia law firm with a San Francisco office. It's quite important to have a strong bench behind you, no matter how good you think you are. You have to be real.
I agree. And your experience with the NLRB, I think that's very important for the subject we're talking about. And that is what to expect with the NLRB. What kind of changes are we going to see in 2021 with a brand new administration coming on board? And I think your insight would be valuable for anybody watching this. So why don't you where do you want to pick up? I mean, there's so much to talk about.
There is. I mean, we could spend a couple hours, but it's one of the problems that I get with reviewing an agency or a particular area of the law is that what you say today may change tomorrow depending on the politics or just on the courts or agency's decisions. I've had my struggles with the NLRB, as you might know. The minute they find out that I'm a former agent, they tend to try and hold you to a standard above others, and I welcome that. But with the new political settings, many people in the industry, both consultants, counsel, and employers say, "Oh, now we're going to have a sweeping change. It's all doom and gloom because the Trump administration." They put in a lot of NLRB board members who are very employer-oriented, and that's true. And you'll see from some of the decisions that I'm going to talk about some of the issues. But really, there's only one open seat on the 5-member board, and that's the board that sits in Washington that basically makes the decisions that the regions throughout the country have to follow. There are 4 members, 3 are Republican, 1 are Democrat. 1 is a Democrat. So you know that there can only be 1 new board member who likely will be a Democrat. So you'll still have a 3 and 2, that is the majority will sit on the Republican side, and they'll be making these decisions. So we're not going to have the sweeping changes. There's a general counsel, there's Peter Robb, and the question is he going to stay for his whole term? It all sounds like political mumbo jumbo, but what it comes out to be is that's where the direction to the regional offices throughout the country will follow. Though from my experience at the regional office, the people in the office, they do their own thing. They like to turn things towards them. When you're investigating a case, I'll show the age of it. You're writing out the affidavit. I'm moving my hand back and forth as if I'm writing. Now they type it on computers and whatnot. But the idea is that's where the real impact of these new cases come. Let me just hit some high points here so as not to get down into the weeds of board law, because it changes. There is the concept of protected concerted activity, one of the foundational of the National Labor Relations Act, which the board follows, of course. And it used to be that if an employee has any kind of action regarding a union, speaks of unions or has anything, and then gets disciplined or punished, terminated for some action they take, the board was quick to claim that that was because of union activity, and they're going to find a charge that will be sustained. And that's whether or not there's even a union active there. It's really important to understand this. The statute provides that, union activity and such, but the real point that I'm raising here is that it doesn't have to be union related. It can be protected. Anything that this employee talks about, for example, we as a group want new wages and new benefits. That gives them some a high level of protection. The other issue.
Dan, real quick,
Yeah.
can I intervene real quick? I think a lot of people don't even realize what a group means. And in the eyes of the board, a group is 2 or more.
That's 2 or more. It's basically, I'll read a statute line or two. It's they can form or join or assist and to engage in other concerted activities for the purposes of collective bargaining, here's the part, or other mutual aid or protection. That doesn't relate to unions. So if I say, if I were an employee, which I wouldn't want to have a person like me as their employee, but if I say, Mr. Smith and Jones and John and Sally, we demand a better wage because we're working the night shift, or we have COVID exposure risks. We want a better, a dollar more an hour. And the employer said, well, that's fine. You're all fired. Right there, that's protected by the NLRB, and they'll take those cases with a great deal of enthusiasm because they want to show that they're a relevant agency. So this is Section 7 of the National Labor Relations Act, sort of very foundational. When I was a board agent, we walked around and said, we're enforcing the act as though we were big shots. Well, it can be a costly and very difficult thing to deal with if you're faced with some of these we call PCA, protected concerted activities. So that's and there's a bunch of cases that are coming out that are showing that it used to be it only has to be an undercurrent of protected activity. Now the board is looking for a real causal connection. It's not that there's just a bunch of people talking about it and you fire somebody or discipline. Now it has to be that person was saying or doing something that related to protected activity, and that's how they got terminated. So the board, it's the Republican element of the board members that is really pushing that agenda. When this changes, you'll see that tightened up a bit. So while it's something new, and people say, well, NLRB is only union, not the case, and it's very strong. Well, I used to like doing the PCA cases because I didn't have to show that I wasn't really a union supporter there. I could say that's the rights of these individuals. I still have friends from 30 years ago who I helped out, and they said, golly, we didn't think the government helped the small person. Well, here I was their champion. Now, of course, I don't think they'll want to talk to me anymore, but that's another story. People ask me, what do I support? And I say, well, I support the rights of companies and employees alike. But if the employer is doing the right thing, that's the right thing to do. Let me talk a little bit about the standards that the new cases that are coming up, and it's really something. There's the Boeing company case, and this is another issue that during the course of negotiations that you have. With the unions, and now we're going to go right to the unions, that you should have workplace rules and policies in place. They've got to be written, they've got to be fair, and they have to be universally applied. So there was a period of time over the last couple of years, just before the new board members were put in place, where if anything in your house rules, in your handbook, or any published rule that you had was at all unlawful, that somebody could reasonably be restricted, it took it to crazy extremes, and the board could pick and choose what it wanted in your house rules, for example, and say that this looks like it might be reasonably interpreted by an employee as being restrictive. The board would jump on it and say this is unlawful. Now, this new case that you'll hear about, and we'll continue, this is back in 2017, of course, This case is called the Boeing Company case. And it established a new standard that makes a balance between the rule's negative impact on the employee's ability for their Section 7 rights and the rule's connection to employers' right to maintain discipline and productivity in their workplace. Those words could be emblazoned on the front of any business. The employer has a right to control their business, is what they're saying. And if your house rules are not blatantly unlawful, you've got the opportunity to keep it in place and it won't be unlawful. And of course, it's always risky. You're on the line. So you need to have counsel or consultant review your rules and make sure they're legitimate and legal.
And you know, one point to bring up, Dan, is remember back when Obama was in office, how often employers had to update their handbooks. We're going right back to this under the Biden administration, and people need to be aware of that now, just to be on the lookout for changes in labor and employment law, because we all know it's coming. And if you talk about having solid handbooks, it's worth as much as the paper it's written on if it doesn't have any teeth. So we have to be prepared. We have to understand that President-elect Biden is going to reverse a lot of the things done under Trump relatively quickly, but also throughout the term of his presidency, we can expect the exact same thing we saw under Barack Obama, which meant clients turning to attorneys what seemed like every month for updates in their handbooks just to keep them above water and on board.
You're absolutely right. That's why the Boeing Company is this case. We among Labor Council, we talk about this sort of thing, is really important because it's going to take some time to change it. There's going to have to be a case getting up to the board. It starts at the region, and the region is bound to follow this ruling. It's bound to follow Boeing. And when we will know, there's sort of like a beacon will turn on when the next case gets up to the board to interpret, again, the Boeing. But as I mentioned when we started, there's only one new member that's going to be appointed to the board. And that'll still leave a majority in place of the Trump appointees, the Republican group. And therefore, it'll be a while. So we have our time and place here, and we do have to be vigilant. It's gone back and forth. I've had a lot of time, as I said, to watch the board, and it's the pendulum. It's swinging, and you always have to have your handbook. That's your first line of defense, and you have to be smart about it. So if you need to review it regularly, so be it. But don't let yourself get caught behind an old handbook. I go into an office and I said, let me see your handbook. And they pull out a binder and I see the dust trail behind it. I said, this is going to be a problem. Don't bind it with tape and such. Put it in a loose leaf. Punch the holes. I mean, it may sound silly. Lawyers talking with good consultants saying how to do your paperwork. But, heck, make sure that you can change it as you need, one page at a time. So that's where Boeing, I mean, there's a case also in Walmart, everybody knows about that organization, where they were trying to ban all kind of insignias during a union campaign. And so the board said, you can ban most of them when you're dealing with the customers, but when you're in the employee break room and you're just dealing with employees, not so fast. So they're trying to make some rules that are distinguishable. So your policies on buttons and insignias, that's a big part of union organizing. When you show up in the workplace saying IAM or UFCW, UAW on your shirt, you're showing people. I have Uniglow on today. I'm not running for anything. But so as far as I'm concerned, you can defend yourself better right now, but it's going to be a while and things are going to change. And there's also the issue of employees. Now we'll move to the high-tech world. Employees' use of the employer's resources at work. That's a big deal in some companies where you don't get a chance to talk to one another, but they have the email. And now the board in this new case, this is about Caesars. We know about Caesars Enterprises. An employer may impose non-discriminatory restrictions including outright bans on the use of employer-owned IT systems. That's unheard of if it's for non-work purposes. That's how the unions have done a lot of organizing in recent years, is they get in, the employees will start emailing and texting each other, and they use the company's resources. And that's where there was a previous case called purple communication, which everybody talked about, at least those of us in this world. And so you make an exception, you apply it universally, you show that it's not just because of the union. So you'll say, well, how do I know if the union's here? Start now. Do these things, take these steps, and make sure that it's done without knowledge, to the best of your ability, of any kind of union organizing campaign. And restrictions, what about cell phones? I dealt with a company that was a giant warehouse down in Southern California. I went there. I like seeing what goes on in the business, so I know what the problems are. So I went in there, and they have you walk by an orange line on the left side. So what's this about? They said, you watch. And there are these little tow trucks inside there whizzing back and forth. It looked like 50 miles an hour. They said, if you have a cell phone in your hand and it rings, you look up, you step to the right, you're dust. So they said, that's the reason that we have our restrictions on cell phone usage. That's a solid reason, and cannot be overcome by saying, well, a union's trying to organize here. Nonsense. It's for the safety. So that's one concept to keep in mind, is have your reasons, and legitimate reasons, for restricting the use of equipment and other kind of new resources. What it'll be next year, I don't know.
Cameras are another area along those lines.
Oh boy, that is. I've had to defend camera cases where they put a camera on top of a flat level building nursing home, looking down to the entrance, and the employer said, and this is under, I think, a Democratic board, and they said the charges read, they were engaging in active surveillance of the union activity in front of the business. Well, it was a nursing home, and there were a lot of break-ins. So, that fight we had to take to the NLRB, and I can't say that we won or lost, because it cost them a lot of money to seek justice. I use justice in quotes. There's the issue of, I'm going to move on, and I don't want to cut you off, and if you have a point, but there's just so much that's happening.
I'll let you talk. I'll jump in when I'm ready. Go ahead.
Okay. I've never seen you be shy about that before in our conversations. I appreciate it. But I'm talking for our folks that are listening to think that I'm not just railing on. There's a case of middle of last year, and whether you can discipline a bargaining unit employee during the collective bargaining relationship. And I've had this a lot. So you get a company that's first organized. And so you get in, they call me to do the bargaining. And so as it's going along, employees will do what employees do. They get disciplined. They have problems. You have to impose a discipline. Well, under the previous law, you would have to negotiate with the union about your ability, your decision to discipline. So if the union wants to fool around and drag their feet, you wouldn't discipline anybody. And how do you deal with that? Well, this new case, 800 River Road, doing business as Care One, it says that there, even with no collective bargaining, that you could impose discipline. And I mean, these are cases to be studied and observed, but you should know as an employer when there's collective bargaining that you don't have to be run roughshod over. It's really important that these rights have been restored to some extent, and your admonition saying, well, Dan, things will change. Yeah, they'll change. But right now, if you're engaging in collective bargaining, follow your constant rules and procedures. Stay with it. It's universal. Risk a little bit only because if you stop disciplining, the employees will know and they'll take advantage.
And while we had that with now we're shooting this video during COVID times.
Oh yeah.
Just got off of 2 campaigns, and wow, we had such trouble with just that. Just getting employees to wear their masks was turned against us. The employees had no hesitation whatsoever to call OSHA, to call the health department, the mayor, even though we were the ones that, we're working with management. We're the ones that wanted the employees safe. Management wanted the employees safe. At the end of the day, they used it as a tool to try to get a mail-in election. One was successful in getting a mail-in election, one wasn't.
That's interesting because, yeah, you sort of turn the world around there. It's the employees, they want the freedom, and the employer wants health and safety. But there's rules now that it's that the duty to bargain about some things of these nature is exigent circumstances. I love these words like this. I don't know, maybe that's why I'm a lawyer. But
well, my whole point on that, Dan, is they hadn't, both companies adjusted their handbooks for COVID procedures. And if they were following those procedures, not just the COVID procedures, but all their procedures. And I'll give you an example. I think I talked to you about this. We had one case that we're almost 100% sure the company is going to prevail, but the union challenged so many votes it will affect the outcome. Now, if this particular company was utilizing their handbook the correct way, disciplining the correct way before union activity, of course, we probably wouldn't even had a union campaign, because employees really thrive on having direction, thrive on understanding their expectations. But if they were following the handbook, they would be able to do exactly what you're saying. Right now they're stuck in a world where following their attendance policy is going to be very difficult when you're losing employees to COVID. Not losing employees, but employees are getting sick. It's just becoming a logistical nightmare for employers. So it's far important to follow it before you have a union activity.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. Now, we'll take it one step further. There's no specific answer for that, because these are emergency situations and you sort of act at your peril. But we can do it with a little bit of knowledge. It can be helpful. Where you have a union, for example, the employer is permitted to act unilaterally during emergencies such as COVID-19, as long as its actions are reasonably related to the emergency situation. And they think, wow, that's really pretty wide open. We can do what we want. Well, it must bargain over the effects within a reasonable time afterwards. So that's the scenario that's going on with the board right now. So it's, everybody wear a mask, and, you've got a union involved. And so you say, you better do it. And the employees gripe about it. They get disciplined or whatever else goes on from the results there. But it isn't to say that you can just leave the union in the dust. What you do is you offer them, you tell the union, I say, send out this letter to the union. Okay, union, we're requiring masks. We're requiring hand washing. If you want to talk about it, the impact, call us. We're busy. We'll talk to you. And that's good enough. Now you have to talk to them when they come to you. But if any of you have ever had the occasion to bargain over effects, okay, so what? Let's sit down with the union. I've done this so many times. You sit down with the union, you say, okay, what are the effects? Tell me. They're healthy. People aren't dying. We're keeping a staff in place. So what do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about people being disciplined for not wearing them? Okay. So they stayed home. I wasn't going to let them work. Those are the kind of issues that are effects or impact bargaining, that if you're really careful about the notice to the union and you're reasonably involved with your employees, you can't just take it as, eliminating benefits, or if you close a business, just say, okay, everybody's gone, we can't do anything. But, as long as you address exigent, it's EXIGENT, one of the nice words, exigent circumstances require that we take these steps, and that we as an employer must do it. That's allowed. And, there's a whole bunch of cases that define this. And I always say, your employers are acting at their peril. So before you go ahead and point your finger and say, do it, you should know what you're telling them to do. So now we're going away from that a little bit. There's the joint employer rule. That's one that's coming up, and we'll see a lot of litigation. We have, there's in California, we pass a proposition about like the gig workers and the economy. The unions are now filing a lawsuit against that. So just because we, the people, want something doesn't mean that we can have it. But the new rule that the board has issued in middle of last year imposed, or it overturned, as Browning-Ferris. Employer has to possess and exercise substantial, direct, and immediate control over at least one essential term and condition of employment. That's really what it is, the story in joint employer. So they can't push all these employees together and say, you know, these unrelated companies, they're going after McDonald's and all the big companies. It has to show some real standard of control, hiring, discharge, suspension. And if it's just an economic relationship, it's not going to be enough. The board does rule, and I'm going to stop rambling about the board only because I know we are time limited, but the board is going to be changing the rules about elections. There's a lot of mail-in ballots, as you talked about, Bob. Even hearings are all mandated right now to be by Zoom.
Ken, we just lost your video.
Really? Okay. Something happened here. I'll be right with you.
Okay. These things happen, even on TV.
Here we are. Yeah, there's just the board is putting into some new rules. They do rulemaking. It's not coming from the cases directly. It's not coming from anywhere but the political will of the NLRB. So they're making some rules about union representation matters. And the one is that I've always found to be very harmful is the blocking charges. They used to have the rule when I was at the board many years after, is that the filing of a mere charge by the union would typically stop an election from taking place. That's really harmful because you're going to be in the middle, for example, of a campaign. It's very, you're really making some headway. You're talking to the employees, and typically, if the union said, "Okay, we're losing ground here, buddy. We better file a charge in 885, or a failure to negotiate, or more likely discrimination, or anything of that nature," and the board will stop the election process. Now the board will go ahead and let the election happen, and then they'll just impound the ballots. That's a big difference. So the union then has to prove up what it is, because once you get the election stopped, it's sort of like the game's over. There's lots of information about construction industry, voluntary recognition, and as I say, one of the big issues is the joint employer rule. So that is a rule. Now the board offices have been ordering R case hearings on Zooms. The judges are doing C case hearings, and they've issued a series of guidelines and cases about mail ballot elections. Now, I haven't had any election with significant mail ballots except when the locations were dispersed over wide ranges of areas. What was your experience, Bob, if you've had any on mail ballots?
So we've had a couple. We had a really big one in Rochester, New York, and it was the same. It was exactly what you were just said. The locations were spread around 2 to 3 different counties, so there really was no other way to do it, and it was rough. I mean, we knew where we stood. We had a good idea where we stood, but we did find out that the unions were more than happy to go to the employees' homes, help them fill their ballots out, take their ballots to the mailbox. It got a little unscrupulous. And then the latest one we had here during COVID, the same thing. I mean, but I can say the employees, I think on both sides were struggling with that. People were forgetting to sign the flap, and then and this was new to us. When they forgot to sign the flap and they called the board sent them replacement votes. Now, when it came down to vote time, they only counted the one envelope with the closest postage date to the day that the ballots were due. So the ballots that they resent weren't even counted.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And that affected both sides, by the way. I mean, it wasn't just, affecting the company. It was just how the board is running under their own independent thought right now, and depending on the region. And that's how they ran it. It worked out for us, so I can't complain.
That's good. Well, it's it's sort of like everybody's under the same rule. Now it's the regional director, that is the individual who's in charge of the local region. The circumstances are that basically the board lets the regional director make that decision.
Exactly what happened.
I'm sorry?
That's exactly what happened here.
Yeah, if it says we conclude only that a regional director who directs a mail ballot election under the circumstances will not have abused their discretion. So that means it's wide open, and especially with the COVID, these circumstances. I know that we were talking about the bargaining situation with COVID. I've got a couple of bargaining situations, renewing the contract. And the union's they've got massive screens set up in these big conference rooms, and we'll just be zooming into that. I don't particularly like the idea, but that's what we got to do. I'm not going to go sit with a bunch of folks in a room to extend out over a year or two, just discussing labor relations. I want it to be safe, and one of my clients is elderly, so I want to be safe with that. But that's what it's going to be for the time being, and we really need to get used to it. We won't have the impact that we thought we did, but we will be insulated from the outrageous employee or two. And I'll conclude only with an anecdote about the negotiation where we gave what we thought was a really good proposal, and one of the employees who was vocal throughout the session stood up, got into the middle of the table gathering we had, ripped up the proposal, threw him down. He said, "This is not an effing proposal that we'll take." And a federal mediator was there. She nearly lost her lunch. So, that's the part that I'll miss being on the Zoom call. So that's it. So, watch the NLRB. It's going to be volatile, and I think still helpful for employers.
Yeah. Well, let's end with this. Let's circle back real quick.
Sure.
Because this is something I talk to employees about all the time. When I'm on the ground consulting, I don't expect a total stranger to believe in me within 30 seconds of meeting me. I'm good, but not that good, right?
Yes.
But the NLRB is also a resource that employees can go to during a union campaign. And since, as a consultant, working with good attorneys, we're providing nothing but information that we are 100% sure is factual.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no problem with employees reaching out to the NLRB. I think the union has a bigger problem with employees reaching out to the NLRB for clarification than when they're dealing with people like me or dealing with attorneys.
No, they don't like that. That is, the union doesn't. And so what we'll do is I usually like to give them or make available on bulletins or whatever the name and number of some of the field attorneys or the field representatives, so they can call directly. You don't want them just to call and get the information officers, who are usually the junior people who don't want to talk to them anyway. So if you have a good board agent, there are some, and you can say to the employee, here's their number, 555, whatever. Call them up, tell them who you are, tell them what you want to talk about. They'll get information. It's an agency of the government. They're paying these folks.
Exactly.
So call up and say, here's what's happening at my workplace. And then if there's a union there and the employee wants to get out, they can ask, hey, how do I get out of this union? And the board agents will tell them decertification petitions and all that sort of thing. And they won't urge them to do it, but they'll certainly give them the information. That's an excellent point. It's a great resource to get that information. Of course, if I get any questions in your part of the world, I have your number on speed dial. So that's all a union campaign should be. It isn't. We've gotten past the time when you're really exhorting people. You must go out and vote the union down or vote for management. So here's the facts. You know, you get a union here. What are you getting? You bargain. We bargain from a blank sheet of paper. We don't owe anything. You could get more, you could stay the same, or you could get less. That really shakes up the story. Go talk to your union, one of these union pushers, ask them. And if they won't tell you, then you'll know what they're worth. So that's, it sounds like I'm doing a union campaign here. I suppose that's what's always going on in my mind. How do we get that straightened out?
Kind of secretly looking through my bag here while you were talking, see if I can find it. And this is how it was presented to me, just to give people an idea. I made the news in the last campaign. They photoshopped me, and all of a sudden I'm a member of management, and there's all the lies.
It's a nice picture, but I got it in my office. It's framed. Don't believe his lies, and there was my picture.
That's what that one is that I just showed you.
Yeah, and that's great because it shows that you're having an impact. Because, and the trouble is that a lot of the employees are afraid to make that decision, and the last person that talks to them is going to be the person they're going to believe. So you've got to just have. So this is really one of my great preventive steps: is make like every day is a potential union campaign in your workplace. And the employer will say to me, well, how do we know? Well, you don't. It'll show up after the union has been bending the ear of your employees, maybe for months or more. So it's always got to be communication. You have to have these policies that are fair. The perceptions that we have, that is that the employers are from the employees have to perceive the employer as fair, because otherwise the campaign is worthless. I had an election. I have to admit that I've lost one or two over the many years that I've done. And what's happened is that the employer thought they could turn everything around after being unfair to the employees. And the employees told them, yeah, we'll vote for you. We'll vote. Absolutely. Tell everybody we're going to vote for the company. And the election took place. I think that they lost by a margin of it was 80 employees. They had 79 votes for the union and 1 for the employer. And that was one of the sort of a person that shouldn't have been voting at all. So you cannot think you're going to change the minds of people. What you can do is educate them with good hard facts and people who will talk to them. No, I, as their lawyer, can't talk to the employees. They would call me a persuader. You might have a better opportunity.
The relationships between us as persuaders, consultants, and attorneys are why our win records are so high. I mean, the best scenario for an employer is to have persuaders and a good attorney and good members of management that's willing to listen to the advice that the attorney and the consultants or persuaders, whatever you want to refer them to, those are the best case scenarios, and that's when you start to win. I just put out some statistics for last year. I don't know if you saw it. I put it up on LinkedIn, and last year it was about 850 RC cases, and that at face value seemed very, very low. And in our industry, we felt it, but it was only really in all reality a little more than 100 cases less than the year before. But what you looked at, and this is I think that I want to end with, when Trump came into office, in the last year Obama was in office, I believe it was around 1,500 or 1,600 cases with Obama. The cases were rising. Trump got into office and they slowly declined over the 4 years. So it wasn't really something palpable, something that you noticed on face value. But we definitely were putting some blame and some onus on 2020 and the cases because of COVID. But that really wasn't the case. The unions were still active. They still were out organizing. they went after lower hanging fruit. When you look at the numbers, the average case, I think it was 62 people in the unit, but that's kind of a lie, because you had a couple of hospitals, you had a couple of cases that had over 1,500 people. Most of them fell between 10 and 50 employees. Most of them that I saw, and I didn't do a hand count, was between 10 and 20. So you have to know what the union's targets are, and you have to be prepared now that a new administration is coming in, and know that those numbers, even though they went down to something that looked very favorable for employers, is getting ready to go back up. And that's getting ready to go back up real quick. We're already seeing it.
And you and I had talked at some point about discussing the cannabis industry, and I won't bring it up now, except I did some statistic analysis myself. And on this program I attended, we had a member of the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, and that's the California analog to the NLRB, because agriculture, is excluded from the National Labor Relations Act. And so I looked up the ALRB, and I confronted this gentleman. I said, "You guys talk about all these laws and everything. I looked up, in the last 2 years, you haven't conducted a single election." I said, "How do you explain that? How do you justify your existence?" He sort of went one of these. "Okay, cut, we're done. The program's over." It's because the agency was ineffective, and those statutes have been ineffective because management has been really handling the cases. So there you are. That's my 2 cents on the cannabis industry, which we'll talk about at another time.
Yeah, I think actually we're going to do another episode right after we're done with this on cannabis. So
sounds good.
You just gave him just a little preview.
That's
Dan,
good to
I want
hear.
to thank you. I want to thank you for hopping on here, talking about the board. I think we're going to see some interesting changes over the next 4 years, some things that have been unprecedented. At the end of the day, we never really know what's going to happen, but we do know that employers have to be more watchful now, more than ever. So I hope people take heed and listen to the information that you gave today. It's very, very important.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of Employee Relations Words of Wisdom, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody.